if you want to own a couple companies, like that's totally cool, but you can't run them all by yourself. So you need people in there to help do that and who understand it. Again, get it, want it, capacity to do it. And we're not out there hiring our bros or whomever that your bros
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
whatever word you'd use.
Yeah.
We're hiring people who are incredible at that thing and that want to do that thing and that bring, something that you do not bring. And you need all the players of the band.
That's a great response. The building businesses. So for the listener, we've been talking about building businesses for the last 15 minutes.
Mhm.
And we're talking about, not so much investing, but we're talking about how to build successful businesses. And so, Nathan, in this latest iteration, I'm going to give you an analogy that I use a little bit about myself over the years, where I have been, I've been pretty good at not chasing, rainbows in my life. And the analogy I use is like, you know, there's like two dogs in a field, right? One dog has dug like 50 holes an inch deep, right? An inch deep. And
Mhm.
then there's one dog and he's like 50 feet on the ground. You just see the dirt coming up behind him in his one hole. And I've been the dog in the hole, the big hole, all my life. And so there's a plus to that in that it's kept me focused, um, and it's kept me methodical. And I've basically been able to use templates and the people around me to create pretty high levels of income over the years. All right. And it's been pretty consistent by doing that. And by doing the same thing over and over and over again, we tend to iron out all the points of friction in the process, right?
Mhm.
Now, whenever I jump into anything new, I realize that what I think I'm jumping into, it could be lending, it could be setting up a fund, it could be social media, it could be wholesaling, it could be whatever, right? It could be, manufacturing, trusses, it could be whatever. Every single like we are in an industry where there are literally as many opportunities in the real estate industry as there are stars in the sky. And so every day we meet other people who are crushing it in this or that or this or that. And so we have this tendency towards thinking what we do is shit and lame, and what, Jocko is doing is
Yeah.
awesome, right?
Yeah.
And so as you look back, you know, in certainly the upper end of the mid range of your career, and you look towards the next 10 years of your career, I'm really curious about what you've learned using that analogy and going forward. Because we've talked, we're going to get into the point of holding real estate, for longer at the end of this podcast. But like, let's keep it here focused about inside the businesses, because, you know, the boats are being burned for us all the time. Interest rates have come in. Like you are a very, very established turnkey provider in Kansas City. And you are also building, I think it was 200, 300, 400 plus new home construction down in Texas, and then interest rates comes in and, you know puts a fire hose on your business. And that's not to mention all the other stressors inside of those actual businesses of doing all of that at the same time. And then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have to pivot because investors are not, there's still people buying real estate, but they tend not to be your turnkey investor, your out of state turnkey investor. Like, there's not a huge amount of people signing up for losing $400 a month. So these pivots they're not a reflection of you know, of your personality type. These pivots are often brought upon us just through the boats being burned, right? The macro or micro economic environment. So as you look back at what you've learned and jumping into, from this seat into that seat into the other seat, I think what I've picked up over the years is that what problem am I trying to solve here? And am I actually solving the real problem? I'll give you an example. You get into a a great podcast by Alex Hermosi yesterday. He was talking about, well, what business are you actually in? Because if you get into the lawn care business, let's say you want to buy a big lawn care business, you're actually getting into the recruitment business, because you need to recruit like, and then the cultural business of recruiting and culturally maintaining that business, right? And then, if you get into a consultancy business, you're getting into the high-end recruitment business. If you get into the gym business, you're getting into the brand and marketing business. The machines and the maintenance, that's irrelevant. It's the branding and the marketing that. So as we jump into these businesses and we're forced to pivot, it's really important to understand what business that we're actually getting into. And when I look at your industry experience inside your businesses, and we're going to get into your influential network in a moment. But as I look at these businesses that you've been to, they're all quite symbiotic because they're all within real estate. But as you go forward in the next 10, let's say the next 10 years, what do you want to take into the next 10 years in your business world, not your investor world? We're going to talk about that later. But in your business world, what would you like the next 10 years to look like given what you've learned in the last 15?
Well, I'll use the construction and development as the example. So we first started buying real estate because we wanted to, own rentals, which then developed into people asking us to do it for them, which developed into a turnkey company, which then blew up, and we had this, you know, huge company and doing 100 plus renovations a year, which had
Yep.
huge overhead, and we scaled with people first rather than process first, and we scaled. So we were doing millions and millions and millions, tens of millions a year, but it scaled beyond our abilities as leaders and also our visions and what we created or what we wanted to create. And so the machine was really running us instead of us letting
Right.
the machine run. And uh and the structure of it too, like who's doing what and how did we. And so as I always take notes during these things, so because I like to remember what we're talking about. So I said, I wrote down, looking back, we didn't. Some people say don't do partnerships, and it doesn't work for people. But what we realized was all of a sudden we're making 10x, 15x with a much smaller operation, utilizing things that we're much better at doing. Uh, but we had to learn it the hard way, like 5 times first. And so, in letting it unfold, I remember this. I think he's from South Carolina. His name's Darren. He said, "Let it unfold, baby. Let it
Yeah,
unfold."
yeah, yeah.
And I don't like doing that. I'm impatient. I don't want to let it unfold. I want it to be freaking here now.
Yeah.
And so going forward, it's keeping things smaller and tighter, and having less people with more responsibility and autonomy than having bajillion people. And also, I utilize a lot of VAs in my companies now who just vastly outperform people that I had who are US based that were 4x or 6x or 10x the cost. And then second was going forward in the business too was really putting literally the only focus is producing revenue. Everything else beyond revenue is what you get to do with it. But if you aren't actually focused on consistently producing revenue and having a machine that spits out cash, then nothing else matters. And the holding doesn't matter. None of it matters. And because we went through several seasons of buying a bunch of rentals and then selling a bunch of rentals and buying a bunch of rentals and selling a
Yep.
bunch of rentals. And so now I'm like, nope, cash machine. I call it the cash machine. You better have in a couple of them. You
Yeah.
get the cash machine,
Yeah.
and then now you have a lot of options. And your problem is now, what do I do about the taxes and my wealth generation and growth? And now you get to solve a different problem.
Hallelujah. What a great answer.